And I do not think there's any imminent attempt on the part of China to invade Taiwan.
Joe Biden and Xi Jinping meet for 3 hours on the sidelines of G20. Taiwan dominates their talks. After a court win for Taiwan's indigenous tribes, the government mulls how to make legal changes to officially recognize more groups. On Taiwan's Penghu Islands, candidates face a tight race to become the next county chief. Plus, Dwight Howard gets used to life in Taiwan. He's hitting the gym and checking out the local night markets. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Liao. Taiwan has featured heavily in talks between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Bali ahead of the G20 summit. It's the first time the two leaders have met in person since Biden took office. John Van Trieste reports.
Two of the world's most powerful leaders face to face. U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping sat across from one another for 3 hours ahead of the G20 summit in Bali. Their goal? Boosting a relationship that's become fraught with tension.
As the leaders of our two nations, we share responsibility, in my view, to show that China and the United States can manage our differences, prevent competition from becoming anything ever near conflict, and to find ways to work together on urgent global issues that require our mutual cooperation.
On the agenda, North Korea, Ukraine, and a regular source of friction, Taiwan. Beijing claims Taiwan is part of its territory and has threatened to take the country by force if necessary. The U.S. doesn't officially recognize Taiwan, but it has the legal responsibility to help Taiwan defend itself. Biden has recently pledged to defend the island from any attack, a position that has rankled Beijing. This is the first face-to-face meeting between Biden and Xi as presidents, and their first talks since China launched military exercises around Taiwan in response to a high-level visit by the U.S. House Speaker in August. But despite relations between the two sides being at one of their lowest points, both sides were conciliatory. Despite predictions from U.S. officials that China may be speeding up plans to take Taiwan, and Xi describing Taiwan as a red line, Biden has expressed confidence that the status quo will hold.
And I do not think there's any imminent attempt on the part of China to invade Taiwan. And I made it clear that our policy on Taiwan has not changed at all. It's the same exact position we've had. I made it clear that we want to see cross-strait issues peacefully resolved, and so it never has to come to that.
Biden said the meeting had not resolved the many points of friction in U.S.-China ties, but he said the two sides will set up a dialogue mechanism for resolving issues. And with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken set to travel to China soon, there are signs tensions may be cooling for now. Howard Zhang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
To find out more about the meeting between Biden and Xi, our reporter James Chater spoke to Amanda Liao, a senior China analyst at the Crisis Group based in Taipei.
Despite some very thorny ongoing issues in the US-China relationship, this meeting seems to have calmed nerves over the relationship between Washington and Beijing. What's your sense of the result after this meeting?
I think this meeting was definitely significant and a positive first step. Of course, a lot of key differences remain in the relationship, particularly over Taiwan, over the economic relationship, over human rights issues, and the two sides will continue to engage in competition. But at the same time, the outcomes of the meeting suggest that both sides desire stability, more stability in the relationship, and that they're ready to begin to discuss how best to manage some of those differences.
Biden said that he got no sense that China was about to launch an invasion of Taiwan, but Xinhua news agency reported Xi is saying that Taiwan remains, of course, the core of China's core interests. Where do you think the question of Taiwan sits after this latest meeting?
What this meeting reflected was in no way a shift in the two governments' policies on Taiwan. Rather, it was really a shift in tone. And in this meeting, he stated quite clearly that, in fact, U.S. policy on Taiwan has not changed, and went a little further to say that the U.S. continues to be opposed to unilateral changes by either China or Taiwan. The Chinese statement made it really clear that Taiwan remains the foremost issue in the relationship. They called it the main red line in the relationship. But at the same time, the statement said that it hoped that the U.S. would uphold their one China policy instead of calling on the U.S. to uphold the one China principle, which of course is sort of China's interpretation of what Taiwan's status is. And I think in there is a small acknowledgement that there are differences in how the two sides see the Taiwan issue.
There are still a host, of course, of very tough questions in the US-China relationship, US export controls on chips perhaps being chief among them. How difficult do you think it will be for this early step of goodwill to be sustained?
I thought the meeting was surprisingly positive. Of course, both sides expend a lot of energy to, I think, lower everyone's expectations, right? The White House said specifically to not expect any deliverables, and so that's part of it. The leaders appear to have tasked their bureaucracies to form a series of working level, discussions on a number of issues. I mean, I think this is a great sign that the two sides are interested in stabilizing the relationship. It's a great sign that they both realize that tensions are perhaps a little higher than either side want it to be. But of course, the devil's in the details, and whether these negotiations produce any real outcomes remains to be seen.
The Soraya tribe and other Pingpu or Plains indigenous groups have been fighting for years to be recognized by Taiwan's government. Last month, the Constitutional Court ruled in favor of the Soraya and gave the government 3 years to make legal changes. Now, the government is talking about how this will happen. Louise Watt has more.
A major achievement after years of fighting. The Soraya, one of Taiwan's indigenous Pingpu or Plains tribes, celebrating after the country's constitutional court ruled they should be recognized officially as indigenous. Now the government has to work out how. When questioned by lawmakers, the head of the cabinet-level Council of Indigenous Peoples suggested the Soraya wouldn't be classified under the existing Plains category.
纳入成为平原、山原以外第三个类别，是这个意思吗？
是的，大法官就是这样子宣判的。他也特别明定，就是至于认定的方式，
是
他尊重立法机关跟行政机关最后的这个规范。
Taiwan's existing laws say only mountain and plains indigenous can be recognized, and the government for years has said the Soraya and 7 other groups don't fall into either category. The Soraya say they're doubtful the government will give them the recognition they deserve.
现在到底这个要怎么修法？我觉得是他还是必须跟喜拉雅跟美国族群这边坐下来谈一下啦，因为他那个也没有具体的一个什么的，大概就是这样子。坦白讲，我也觉得没有现在讲那个的话，应该也不算什么。
Members of the Soraya and other tribes have long appealed to the government for recognition. But authorities argued that the Plains people had assimilated into Taiwan's majority Han society and culture more than those in the mountain and eastern regions. Right now, just under 600,000 people have official indigenous status. Recognition of the Plains people could raise that figure significantly.
全埔族运动的人数是足少，人数到底有多少？有看后边的理由来决定。利益很大，有人数就会增加；利益很少，大概很少人会去。
While the court ruled that the Soraya and other Plains tribes should be granted indigenous status, there's still some way to go until they get the equal recognition for which they've spent years fighting. Patrick Chen and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan says it has successfully developed its own military drones. The country's top weapons research organization says several domestically produced models are now ready for mass production. The agency says producing these drones at home will be cheaper than buying them from other countries, and that the aircraft will improve Taiwan's ability to defend itself without putting its soldiers at a greater risk.
军用无人机在作战恶劣的环境呢，它比较非常安全可靠的机身的结构，以及它的可靠的动力系统，它有85%以上都在国内自制的，85%，甚至有些更高。
Taiwan ranks in the bottom 10 nations in climate change performance. That's according to the latest Climate Change Performance Index released by a German NGO ahead of the UN Climate Conference later this week. German Watch ranked a total of 59 countries based on their greenhouse gas emissions, renewable energy usage, and overall climate policy. Taiwan scored poorly behind large polluters such as the United States and China due to its reliance on fossil fuels and lack of a clear pathway to phasing out oil and gas. But Taiwan's Environmental Protection Administration rejected the ranking, saying the government has already published a plan for net zero emissions by 2050. Shares in the world's largest contract chip maker, TSMC, rose by 4% in Taiwan on Tuesday. That's after it was revealed American billionaire Warren Buffett's company owned TSMC stock worth over $4 billion. Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway on Monday revealed it owned the shares in a regulatory filing. It is a rare move into the technology sector by the U.S. conglomerate. TSMC is one of only a few companies worldwide capable of producing the most advanced chips. Its shares hit a 2-year low last month due to a sharp slowdown in global chip demand. With just over 10 days left until Taiwan's local elections, the race to become county chief is heating up on Taiwan's outlying Penghu Islands. The incumbent there faces a struggle to keep his job against the man he beat in 2018. Stash Butler reports.
Penghu locals give an impassioned cheer for Democratic Progressive Party candidate Chen Guangfu. For Chen, the upcoming local elections are a chance for him to win back control of the island group between Taiwan and China. But to do so, he'll have to triumph against the man he lost to 4 years ago. Current County Chief Liao wants a second term. He cites his achievements in office, which include cleaning out the fish market at Penghu's main port.
马公呢有一个渔港市场。 那么，因为呢，常年呢都有臭味，在这个议会还有我们的农渔局跟中央的一个补助，那我们呢把它解决。
Voters this year will choose from 3 candidates. First, Chen of Taiwan's ruling DPP, who was the county chief until 2018. Then the incumbent, Liao, from the opposition Kuomintang. And finally, independent candidate Ye Zhulin. In 2018, Liao beat Chen by just 3,000 votes. This year, polls put them neck and neck, and Chen is relishing the chance to return to office in a county rich with history.
这军事要塞，像军事已经开放的这是咱澎湖相当特色的。像咱的文化艺术啊，咱的金庙教堂，拢100几年。
Penghu has served as a faithful harbour for centuries under Dutch, Chinese, and Japanese rule, now as part of a democracy. When the polls open on November 26th, each candidate is hoping it'll be them that voters place at the county's helm. Klein Wang and Stash Butler for TaiwanPlus.
NBA star Dwight Howard arrived in Taiwan last Thursday to begin his stint with the Taoyuan Leopards. The NBA star won't play his first official game until Saturday, but he's wasting no time in getting to see a bit of Taiwan, hitting the gym, and the local night markets. At 208 centimeters tall, Dwight Howard is a difficult person to miss. And when he makes a public appearance in Taiwan, people flock to him, eagerly welcoming him to the country. Howard had been one of the National Basketball Association's most prolific players, becoming an NBA champion and 8-time All-Star in his 18-year career. But last week, he unexpectedly announced that he was coming to play for the Taoyuan Leopards in Taiwan's T1 Professional Basketball League. The U.S. basketball star has expressed nothing but excitement over his move to Taiwan. And now he's here, he's diving headfirst into the local way of life. Howard's new team recently released his training footage, which looks every bit as intense as you'd expect from a pro athlete. But what does a big guy like Howard do after a tough gym session? Hit the town for some food, of course.
What is it? Chicken? Chicken ass. Chicken ass. Oh!
Howard was spotted at a night market in Taoyuan on Monday evening. Hundreds of people gathered around as he devoured Taiwanese treats like candied fruit and oyster pancake. How'd he like them? Well, it looks like some things will take a bit of getting used to. After filling up on food, Howard tried his hand at night market games. Target practice and mini bowling were a breeze for him. But the claw machines presented more of a challenge.
I'm gonna try this.
Howard's arrival marks a huge step forward for Taiwan's professional basketball scene. He is, by far, the most decorated basketball player to ever compete in Taiwan. And if he continues to embrace life here, that just might be enough to entice more NBA players to come and play in Taiwan. Patrick Chen and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus. Super Junior, one of the world's most well-established K-pop groups, is coming to Taiwan, and concert organizers are trying to make sure fans won't be overcharged. Scalpers had been selling some concert tickets for over $3,000 each, but organizer KKTix has voided illegally sold passes and will put them on sale again at the venue doors. They've also filed a police report against scalpers. Super Junior will be performing for 3 nights straight in Taipei next week. Coming up, the world population has reached a new milestone, but here in Taiwan, numbers are going down. Details after the break.
On the road! Have you been outdoor lately?
I've walked the dog.
From the jungle to the ocean. Are we ready? Let's do it.
What is that?
The size of a scooter.
And I think I'm gonna fall in love with you.
Good.
Thanks for watching Taiwan Plus. For more stories from here in Taiwan and around the world, visit the website TaiwanPlus.com and download the Taiwan Plus app.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. The world's population has hit a new milestone. The United Nations estimates that the number of people living in the world surpassed the 8 billion mark on Tuesday. It's been only 11 years since the population reached 7 billion, but the growth rate is starting to slow down. Projections say the next billion is 15 years away. And while the number of people across the planet is growing, the population here in Taiwan has already begun to shrink. To find out more on what's causing this, reporter Eric Gao spoke with Zheng Yanxin, a research fellow with Academia Sinica.
So what are the factors behind the difference between the world continuing to grow in population while Taiwan is seeing a shrinking?
So this is largely caused by the population that is still growing in the developing nations. And these nations actually have a larger share of the global population, and they still have quite high total fertility rate as opposed to the developed nations. So basically what I'm saying is that the reality, quote unquote, that we are experiencing around us is not the same thing as what people are going through in, let's say, in India or in many countries in Africa. Population there are still growing faster than East Asia, the America, or Europe.
For Taiwan's recent decline in population, some analysts have said it has to do with the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you explain how that contributed to Taiwan's shrinking population?
Before the pandemic, the population and fertility rate in Taiwan has already been on the decline for a long time. The pandemic just sort of adds to the long-term decrease in total fertility rate. And why is that? Because when people are faced with uncertainties, often they postpone or they avoid from having more children, postpone their fertility plan. But you see that across the globe, in Europe, in the US, and in Taiwan, all these countries that went through the pandemic all have lower fertility than the level they experienced prior to the pandemic.
Here in Taiwan, when we talk about the shrinking and aging population, one of the top concerns is economic, that we'll have a smaller workforce in the future. But aside from that, is there anything else that policymakers should be more concerned about, in your opinion?
We're going to see a shrinking share of the youth population or young adult population in the coming decade, and a growing share of the older, senior, or the elderly population. And this is going to translate into the population composition of the voting population. So it's going to shift the decision makers, quote unquote. So what policymakers and governments should pay attention to is how can we ensure the younger generation's voices and then their needs and their aspiration can be properly addressed.
Relatives of a Taiwanese volunteer fighter killed in Ukraine joined a memorial ceremony in the western Ukrainian city of Lviv on Monday. 25-year-old Zheng Seng-Guang from Taiwan's eastern Hualien County died on November 2nd after fighting against Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. He was a member of the Carpathian Sich Brigade, a Ukrainian military unit which is made up of foreign volunteers and local fighters. Taiwan's foreign ministry praised Zheng's warrior spirit and sacrifice for the cause of liberty. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine rages on, a toy factory in Ukraine has come up with a way to bring hope to the country's youngest citizens. It comes in the form of some of the country's most important defensive equipment.
These children in Ukraine are playing with plush versions of the country's military hardware. The toys are made by the Kapitsia factory, which is run by women. The idea to start making these toys came after Russia invaded Ukraine in mid-February.
Сумна звістка, яку ми почули про початок війни, про оточення нашої території окупантами, болісно відгукнулася у кожного. Дуже болісно було відчувати це горе, яке на нас нахлинуло. І тому ми почали думати і працювати.
They decided to make a variety of plush toys that resemble some of the weapons used by the military to fight back against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, like this Javelin anti-tank missile and this Turkish attack drone. But its most popular toy is a replica of the world's largest plane, Ukraine's very own Miria. It served as a symbol of national pride, but was destroyed by Russian artillery in April.
В іграшку мрії я вкладаю всю свою любов. Я дуже сподіваюся, що ми дуже швидко переможемо. Все в нас буде гарно, і мрію ми знову побудуємо.
The toy factory says selling these toys doesn't just raise money for the war effort, but also gives inspiration and hope to the younger generation.
Робиш іграшку і підіймається дух такий бойовий. Хочеться приносити радість нашим діткам, доплакати, нашим воїнам. Хочеться, щоб побистріше це все закінчилося. Якось додому приходиш, зразу такі думки, ці сирени, коли включаються, важко. Ну, коли на роботі працюєш і розумієш, що ця іграшка куплять дитинки, і дитинка буде радуватися цієї іграшки, і ти вже знаєш, що ти якусь частинку щастя приносиш.
The factory says they will continue to make these types of toys for as long as the war goes on. But the workers hope that the children of Ukraine will never have to touch the weapons themselves. Patrick Chen and Hame Okan for TaiwanPlus.
Rescuers in southeast Australia on Tuesday were working to save hundreds of residents trapped by floodwaters. Emergency crews in New South Wales sent out more than a dozen helicopters after heavy rain over the weekend flooded houses, highways, bridges, farms, and roads, cutting off entire communities. The state's Rural Fire Service said it had already saved 67 people, some of whom were clinging to rooftops and trees in what is the biggest flood rescue operation in the state's history. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Liao. Take care and see you next time.